Hello.
Hey everyone.
We are Happiness Hunch, and today we want to talk about detachment. I have to say, detachment is a word I came across in my faith journey, and it's not a word that I really welcomed into my life or into my vocabulary. I really didn't like this word at all. But I have to say, I have come to love it, and I'll tell you why. Back in 2010, I was at a state in our family life where I had given birth to Seth, who was then 3, and we had 3 other kids.
It was a long birth.
Yeah, it was a 3.
3 whole years.
Actually, he was my worst birth. That is a true story. But anyway, so he's 3, and I'm homeschooling our other 3, and we're heading into junior high years, and I'm beginning to get stressed. And I was trying to do so many things perfect. You know, Isaac was sickly when he was young, so I got really into nutrition. So I am trying to do nutrition perfectly. I'm trying to do education perfectly. I'm trying to do my faith perfectly. And my house, decorating, organizing, the garden. You know, I'm trying to do all these things just perfectly, and it nearly killed me. So because as I was adding more kids into homeschooling, that was just becoming a major project. And so, and I was trying to control all of these areas and keep them all in check and all in balance. And it made me very anxious. And I began to really have a lot of fear of failure in these areas that I was trying so hard to be successful in. And so I became unhappy. So I became a grouchy mom. I became a grouchy wife, and I became a grouchy Christian. And then, of course, this is not the goal. So I'm like, okay. And even my husband, Mike, told me, "You're grouchy. What's going on? Like, I don't even like being around you. You're so grouchy." So I was like, okay, this is not working. This is not Christian. And I took it to prayer. And at this point, early on in my journey, I feel like God was telling me all kinds of stuff, telling me what to do with this and how to think about that. And for years up to this point, he really wasn't saying anything much at all. So I was like, I don't know what he's going to say, but I've got to take this to prayer because this is not good. So I did, and he did. He told me, "Lynn, you absolutely are holding on too tight. You're holding on too tight, and you need to let me do this." And at first I thought, well, okay, these things are important, and I take responsibility for these areas very seriously. But then I was like, he said, "Let me do it." And I thought, well, heck yeah, like if somebody else can do this, I would love it. So I began to really contemplate the word detachment more and started thinking, maybe I could like this word. Maybe I could like the feeling of detachment. And so I really started to, pray around this more. And over the last 10 years, so now it's 2020, and I've been practicing a spirit of detachment for these last 10 years. So my goals have not changed. It's really my disposition that has changed. So I have just sort of released the progress in these areas. I've released the outcomes in these areas, much more so, not perfect, much more so to God.
Much better though.
And it, oh my God, it's like a whole new world. Really, it is. And a vast improvement. A number of things helped me along the way, but constantly ask myself, am I attached to this? Can I give this up? So I practice material things, giving away material things. Part of the simplicity and the minimalism really helped me with this whole mindset. Because as I could give things away, I began to think, yeah, I can just detach myself from this. I'm not attached to that. I'm not attached to this. And I began to do that to these other broader, bigger areas that I considered so important. And I still am a researcher. I'm still a planner. I still want to execute and check everything off my little tidy list. I'm still like that. My personality hasn't changed. But I've just decided I'm going to work really hard at these things. I'm going to do these things, but I'm going to release these outcomes. I'm not in charge. God is in charge, and I really want what he wants. So, and he has way more power, way more influence than I will ever dream of. So I just began to trust him more. So now I have some statements that I tell myself that I just thought I would share. One is that God's plan is infinitely better than mine, definitely. and he's in charge. So he's in charge and I'm under him. So I kind of take myself out of the picture more and focus more on him. That failure is good for me. That's a hard one because I'm a firstborn kind of perfectionist. Take a deep breath on that one.
Alpha personality.
And I don't like failure, but I came to realize that failure is good for me, and that God uses failure. And I just really want to acquiesce to whatever it is he's trying to do, because I know he's trying to take me to the right places and do the right things. So now I'm not afraid of failure. I don't like it. I'm not saying I like it, but I will have the attitude that I will learn from my failures. And I'm going to grow from my failures. Because ultimately, God's trying to build me up. He's not trying to break me down forever. If he allows a failure, it can feel real horrible for a time. But that's usually because he really is trying to build me up. That yielding to God doesn't mean I'm lazy. I hate laziness. Ugh, I just hate it. I'm not lazy. I'm a really hard worker. And somehow I just thought it was all on me to do all these things. And so, but I came to realize that it's actually wisdom. It's not laziness at all. It's wisdom. Another one is that surrendering to God's glory means that his glory is going to come into my life. And that's what I want. I want his glory. He's really the acting part in all of our lives, right? So, and I want to welcome that glory into my life. And then lastly, another statement is that safety and security, which is something I think women in particular really seek, is really just found in God. It's not going to be found in the things of this life.
Or in controlling everything.
Or in controlling everything. It's a falsehood. It's a, what is it?
An idol.
Yeah, maybe.
Control.
Yeah, and so, it's so completely unhealthy. So anyway, just realizing these things and that God loves me and that he's trying to take me to a good place. He loves me and he loves my children. He loves my husband. He loves my family. He loves my life, and he's trying to give me a good life. And I just need to kind of move with him and let that be my goal. Even though I have these other things that I'm working on, and they're good things. They're all good things. But it's all more in the disposition and in the detachment of outcomes and progress and how to do things, and just always having a listening ear for what God might be doing, how he might want to tweak something, turn my head this way or that way and get me to notice something new. So that's what detachment means for me. That's how it's sort of grown in my life over the last 10 years. And I'm imagining that
You're going to let me talk?
That Mike's saying, shut up and let me say something. I got a whole lot of good stuff to say now.
Well, are you going to give me a turn?
Yeah.
Oh,
So
okay.
what do you have to say about detachment. Attachment?
Well, I would start here by saying, going back, retracing those same steps that you so beautifully laid out, that the key thing is, I used to say all the time, is these are all good things, but they're all good things. But if you're getting angry and anxious about all of them, it's not a question of not pursuing those things. It's a question of being detached in the pursuit of those things. So that's difficult, obviously, as you've said well. But for a long time, we'd go round and around, because you would say to me, well, you just don't care about those things, right?
That was my
And
interpretation.
I did care very much about these things.
I'm trying so hard and you don't care.
But to me, the pursuit of that good is spoiled by the fact that every time you pursue it, you become angry and anxious and
I began to see that cycle. I began to see that cycle.
So what happens is it's ultimately about trying to control things, control the outcome, control the environment. And the truth is most of the times, most of the things we have to deal with in life we don't control. And so if we're always feeling the need to be in control, then we're always going to be miserable, because most of the things we want to control, we can't control. All we can do is pursue them with a certain, agility and flexibility. And then, sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't work out. But I think just to highlight the big point that you made is that, that God has a plan, And I think we want to avoid like two extremes. On the one hand, some people want to assume a kind of like a quietism where it's like, well, it's just all God and I don't have to have a will about anything and I'm just laying down and whatever happens, happens. And the other extreme is, everything's got to happen the way I plan it to happen and the way I want it to happen. Life is really more like a dance. So God sort of has the big picture in mind, and then things unfold, and we cooperate and participate in those things. And I think the thing we have to keep in mind is that when things work out the way we want them to, it isn't necessarily because we just did it so perfectly that time. And then it doesn't, when it doesn't work out, then we just kick and scream because we didn't get our way or whatever. But, what God wants to do is he wants to change us in the process. He wants to grow us, as you said. He wants us to grow in virtue. So when it makes sense for things to work out in our favor, because that's going to help us grow, then things will work out in our favor. At least this is how I see it, sort of divine providence, sort of governing over our life. And when it's going to be to our advantage to grow in an area by something not working out and, having to learn to deal with the disappointment or the adversity and to bring other virtues out like patience or understanding or, learning not to temper our anger or whatever it might be. So I think, God is more concerned with helping us be transformed, and the circumstances within which we live or the goals that we pursue are sort of in service of that growth.
Right.
So he wants us to make goals. He wants us to pursue those things, to whatever it happens to be for us, but he also wants us to be patient in the pursuit of those things. He also wants to help us keep those things in the right perspective so that they don't become too important to us, right? So we keep them in balance with other things. So because sometimes we pursue things too aggressively and neglect things that are actually more important, and neglect our duty around other things that we should be doing. So we have to try to keep all of those kind of things in right order. So at any rate, detachment is just a great virtue, to pursue whatever it is in life, but to do it with a certain willingness to say, hey, I'm going to do my best. If it doesn't work out, it's okay. God has something else in mind that's probably better than what I had in mind. And sometimes the very thing that we pursue really is the thing that God has in mind. And he blesses all of that. He blesses the things where, it looks like we got what we chased after and wanted. And he also desires those times when we don't. And in those times, he just wants us to really trust him and to continue pushing forward in our life day to day. But when we lose our peace, we know that we're too attached.
There's an attachment issue going on.
Yeah.
One other thing I wanted to say that definitely came over me during this 10-year process, and Mike had actually been saying it all along, but being that firstborn, very task-oriented, that's just my personality, I also had to learn that really my relationships are the most important thing in my life. So I placed a lot of emphasis on these other areas that are extremely important. But I also just realized that, I was neglecting relationships for these other goals. And that was totally not okay. And getting that perspective, getting that right, helped too with the whole detachment. Because I just realized, where God really wanted me to put my concentrated attention. And not that these other areas, like I said, are not important. They are. But just to sort of get that right and have that balance of priority on relationship.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I would summarize that by saying that it was very consistent for both of us. Really, it wasn't just you. I had my yard outdoor projects that, I was in hot pursuit of in my studies or whatever. But what was happening is that our relationships, the injury or the harm done to our relationships with each other, with our kids, even our friends, became the collateral damage to the willful pursuit of what in the end became vain goals. And they were vain not because they weren't good things to pursue, but because they were pursued at the expense of everything else, because we'd go so frustrated and anxious and angry when things, weren't happening. And so we had to learn, constantly to be detached from those outcomes and the strong willful drive to check it off the list so that we could be present to the moment or keep our attention on whatever it was that God had in mind. And a lot of times when we were raising kids, it was paying attention to the needs the kids had, spending time with them, even though I'd have to put off the project till the next Saturday or, whatever it might have been. We eat dinner a little bit later and we want to, whatever. So anyhow, so detachment is really a grace, and I've discovered that it's really the fruit of prayer. We have to pray every day, and we have to always ask that God's will be done in everything that we're doing, and let Him lead us through that day, through that week, through that month, or whatever. And what we find, there's one other thing I say. This is getting long, but one more thing is that I often found that when I would let go and sort of pray about things, God could always show me a better path through.
Yeah, shortcuts.
Yeah, through, like, do this first and then do that, or do it this way. I had my ideas about how this should be done. And then if I spent some time praying, God said, well, this is actually a better way to do it. And it took half the time. So it isn't that God didn't care about what we cared about, but a lot of times in our willful striving, we were blind to a much better way of doing it.
Because we're so focused on,
So anyway, that was the other thing. All right, I think that's probably enough.
Yeah, so we'd love to hear your stories around attachment, detachment, control. Has this ever been an issue for you? If so, let us know in the comments. You'll make us feel better.
Are we alone out there?
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, it was great to visit with you today, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye.
Take care. See ya.